القدر صفحة عذابي اللي يطويها، وكل قصة حياتي وكل مآسيها، قصة موت مرسومة الصور بيها، مصايب بيها دهري هواي راواني. من صغري ابتدت قصة معاناتي،
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وجاءوا أباهم عشاء يبكون، قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند متاعنا فأكله الذئب وما أنت بمؤمن لنا ولو كنا صادقين. وجاءوا على قميصه بدم كذب، قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل والله المستعان على ما تصفون. وجاءوا أباهم عشاء يبكون، قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند متاعنا متاعنا فأكله الذئب وما أنت بمؤمن لنا ولو كنا صادقين. وجاءوا على قميصه بدم كذب قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل والله المستعان على ما تصفون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman across the globe, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: why am I here? Keep that question in the back of your mind. Inshallah, we'll return to it. We live in uncertain times. We live in a time of a global pandemic that has changed our life as we know it, and the lives of the loved ones that we have. We live in a time where some of us have lost our loved ones to this pandemic. We live in a time where still others are with loved ones who are fighting against this virus and are on the beds trying to recover. And further still, there are those of us who are trying and fighting to make sure that each and every one of our loved ones is protected and is immune, literally and metaphorically, to this disease. And it is an uncertain time which has caused so many people to question life itself, to reorder and rethink and reorganize our priorities, to think about what is the most important thing in my life, what are my necessities, what are the most important things with the moments that I have left. And furthermore, it's required us to rethink and re-examine our world as a whole. It's also a time of uncertainty with respect to social justice. Yes, indeed, it is a time of heightened awareness with respect to matters of social justice. Yet there is uncertainty about what will happen. Will the same system continue? Will the same world continue? Inside all of these questions, the fundamental, pivotal question which encapsulates all of these questions is, why am I here? And it is this question which we will seek to examine in the subsequent nights. The largest and the biggest and perhaps the most important question of our lives and the life of every individual on this planet. Why am I here? Am I here, for example, in order to enjoy my time here? Am I here, for example, in order to have a contribution and make a contribution to this world? Am I here, for example, in order to be able to be remembered and have a legacy as an individual, that the society and the world around me says that I'm someone worth being remembered? Or is it something else? These questions are at the heart of human existence. And each and every one of us is faced and confronted with this in these sets of questions throughout our lives. From the position of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and the followers of Karbala, and the followers of the movement of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, which we have come here to revive once again in our hearts and our minds, it is upon us to make sure, it is upon us to understand what is our answer to this question within the framework of the Husseini movement, within the framework of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, within the framework of the scholars of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. What perspectives, what insights, what answers have they given us to these deep questions of life, if they have explored them at all? And indeed we will find that they have explored these and given such answers which can help us get a sense of contentment, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of being, a sense of belonging in our world. When we come to the commemoration and the remembrance of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, the question that comes to mind is, how did an individual, this man who is the grandson of the Holy Prophet, make this stand where he was willing to take not only himself, not only his brothers, not only his children, not only his women, his entire family and the closest people to him, to the plains of Karbala and give the ultimate sacrifice? The clarity that the Imam had, the certainty that the Imam had, the sense of purpose and meaning through the divine message of God Almighty, the Imam had absolute clarity. Now you may say, that is the Imam. You may say, that is the individual who has been entrusted to guide us on this path. However, in that same message and in that same mission of the Imam alayhimus salam, there are answers for you and I. There are jewels for you and I to glean and to capture so that we can understand what is our purpose here in our world. I say this to you in a time that we are of heightened uncertainty, perhaps the greatest level of uncertainty that we have seen in our lives. Where will society go from here? Will we find a cure to this pandemic? Will we find some ease in this environment? What is the answer to these questions? To this question and the other questions that lie beneath the surface of these questions? In our subsequent night, this being the first in a series of lectures tackling the most deep and the most meaningful questions, we will give a high-level glance of what it is that we seek to cover in the subsequent nights. Issues and matters such as, what is my worldview? That is, how do I see the world? Do I see the world from the perspective of materialism, for example? Do I see the world from the perspective of the hereafter solely? Do I see this world, for example, from the perspective of hedonism, where I am here to maximize my pleasure? Do I see this world as suffering? And if my worldview, once I've established it, does my worldview have an impact on how I operate in the world? Does my worldview influence how I exist in the world and who I am? This is a pivotal question because you will understand that the beliefs that you adhere to in your life have such a profound impact on who you are that it changes the entire paradigm of your existence. Your narrative and understanding who you are completely changes your reality. I'll give you one example. And the example is the following. And this will be the foundational element of our discussion as we elaborate more on this concept. I remember I was in London some years ago, and during this time, not too long ago, during this time in London, I was walking with some friends by a restaurant in London. Now this London restaurant was very famous. It seemed to have a very long line outside the door, not inside. Outside of the door there was a queue, as it is known in London, And when we saw this queue, when we saw this line passing by, the person passing by, ourselves, looked inside this very restaurant, and inside and seeing this restaurant, you saw at that moment that there was very, very much empty space. Now bear with me, because this is a metaphor and example for our world. When you notice that there was not many people, the question you're asking yourself, then why this line outside? As if there is no space inside. In fact, it was 2 stories, up and down. Why is it that there are seats available downstairs, and when one looks upstairs, it seems like there are seats open, and yet there's this long line outside? One may say, for example, perhaps there are reservations. Perhaps, for example, there are certain seats that have been reserved by people who have called before. There have been seats that have been reserved by people who have booked well in advance, for example. Perhaps that's one scenario. Or perhaps the owners and the management of the restaurant knows psychology. That is how the human mind works and how the human mind operates. That is, that if you induce scarcity, you are able to change the entire paradigm. You can make something desired by inducing scarcity in it. That is, that these people realize that there's a long waiting line. That means there must be no space. There must be a huge demand for this locality. And hence, they queue up and they line up in order to get a place in it. Now, how does this relate to a worldview? Imagine for a moment you are that individual and you are that personality who doesn't know about the psychology. You don't know about how the world operates. And you just think that because there's a line outside, therefore there must be a situation where there is a huge demand. Your worldview will reflect this idea that you will think that this is a very, very in-demand restaurant, although it may be a restaurant which no one cares for whatsoever. But those management and those leadership may very well have duped you. They may very well have fooled you into thinking and perceiving that this is all that matters. That this is the most important place and this is the most important restaurant. Not because it has the best quality food, not because it has the best ingredients, not because of any of that, but because your mind perceived scarcity and therefore you believe that this is the most important thing. This is, by the way, why precious metals and precious stones, such as diamonds, such as gold, have such value, because of scarcity. Sometimes the scarcity is real, and sometimes it's perceived. The question is, do you know which one it is? In your life and in your world, if you believe that this world and this life is all that exists, and there is nothing after this life, and that when you die, you will annihilate, and you will cease to exist, and there's no hereafter, your actions in this life will reflect that mindset. Your actions in this life will reflect that worldview. Your actions and your being and how you operate in this world will all be based on that paradigm that there is nothing to be after this. Now take the flip side. If you believe that there is a hereafter, if you believe that there is a test, a trial, there is sacrifice to be made, your worldview will be entirely different. You will act with justice on this planet. You will act with fairness on this planet. You will act with equity on this planet. You will work and strive to serve others because you know that that is the right thing to do. You will operate from an ethical framework. You will operate from a perspective that you will be accountable in another realm, in another space, in another environment. You may get away with something here, but in the court of the Almighty, in the court of God, there will be a recollection. There will be something that will be there. That shifts your entire paradigm. The same thing is true in the restaurant example that we just went through. If you believe that that restaurant is important, if you believe that restaurant is scarce, if you believe all of that, at that moment in time, what happens? You will act accordingly. You will make preparations well in advance. You will stand in line for hours on end. This doesn't only happen in restaurants, by the way. This happens in products, consumer products. Without taking any names, there are products in our world that people stand in line for days on end sometimes, sleeping the night away in order to be the first in line to get that product. Why? Is it necessarily because it's better technologically? Not necessarily. There's perhaps much better things technologically that you can spend your time and effort and resources in getting. But you have a worldview that tells you that that is the most important thing, that you need to dedicate time and effort to be able to get there and have that device first. What's your priority in life? What's the most important thing in your life? Ask yourself that and really reflect in the next subsequent nights. What was the most important thing to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? What was the most important thing to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam? Did Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam not love his children? Did he not love his family? Did he not love the people in his life? Okay, you may say Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam is too high. I agree with you. What about his companions? What about those people who gave their life on the plains of Karbala, in the tragedy of Karbala? Did they not love their loved ones? Did they not love their families? Did they not love their children? Yet they put everything on the line. You may find in our journey in the next few nights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His representatives, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they may not have asked you and I to give our life. They may not have asked us to sacrifice our children. They may not have asked us to give everything that we have at every moment in time and sacrifice everything and give the ultimate sacrifice the way Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam did. They may not ask us of that. But there may be something else that we have been asked of. Us, in this life, in 2020, in the West, in Europe, in North America, and across the globe. Quran al-Majid wal-Furqan al-Hamid says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ. This term, lan, in the Quran al-Majid wal-Furqan al-Hamid, whenever this term is used, it is a term of finite nature that will never happen, an impossibility. That Musa alayhi salam, Moses is on the mount and he says, my Lord, my Creator, I want to see you. And the response comes from the Lord. Musa, Kalimullah, the one who has the ability to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the response comes from the Lord. Musa, lan tarani, you will never see me. It will never happen. Try as you might. Infinity may pass, time may pass, you will never see me. That same term is being used here in the Quran. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never obtain, you will never achieve, you will never get what? Righteousness in your life until what? Until you give away that which you love. The Quran is telling us, the Word of God, that you'll never attain it. Your family, your loved one, you may have to give something away. And in that giving away, you will achieve righteousness. You will attain what you are seeking in your life. Therefore, sacrifice, trial is an element of life. But I want to give you hope. And in these subsequent nights, we will be studying it from the domain primarily of the Quran, the Word of God, and also the ahadith and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, because these two are our guiding compass in life. That is, when we are lost, they tell us where our direction is. But we won't stop there. We live in a modern world. We live in an increasingly complex world. So we will also be discussing modern psychology. We will be discussing modern philosophy and the applied aspects of philosophy in the last several hundred years and how they can help us understand the uncertainty of our world. We will be understanding from the psychology how our mind works, from philosophy how the thought works, how logic works, and what I should be focused upon. But we won't stop there. We'll actually delve into these dynamics to understand questions such as doubt. What is doubt? And why is doubt so important? And why doubt can have a positive element of our life, and how doubt unanswered can be the element which destroys our life. And how important it is in our world. You see, we live in a world of uncertainty, but we also live in a world of doubt. A world where, for example, we want proof and evidence about everything, which is good on one side, which is beautiful on one side, that our scientific method is based on the system of doubt. This concept of skepticism in philosophy in the last 200-300 years of philosophy has been very beautiful in order to help us get conclusions such as science, such as understanding our world and asking better questions. But there's another aspect of doubt. That aspect of doubt is doubt which is remaining unanswered. That when I ask one question, it takes me one question to put doubt in someone's mind. For example, where does this khums money go? For example, someone may ask. It sounds, the question is leading as a loaded question to put doubt in the mind of the person. You have the right to ask the question, no doubt, no problem. But also seek out the answer. How do I know God exists? Excellent question, which we'll explore in the subsequent nights. But before that, you have to wonder, that doubt, that question, if it's unanswered, it can be your downfall as a human being. Because when questions add up and accumulate with doubt, without them being answered, what ends up happening is they stack up until it becomes the straw that broke the camel's back. That one small question added on top of layers of questions leads you to say, I don't have any time for this religion. Islam, Ahlul Bayt? No. Islam altogether? No. I'll try to find another religion. Oh, no, not even another religion. I'll try to go to agnosticism. No, I'll try to go to atheism. And this is becoming a challenge with many people, young and old alike. How many young people who go off to university, who go off to a professional career, and afterwards religion is no longer on the main focus, it is on the peripheries. How do you answer that? How do you deal with that? How do you cope with that environment? How do you work with this environment? What is the answer to these big questions of life? And how did the message of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam answer? Because Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, if you remember nothing, remember this. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam was an individual who had absolute certainty. He had absolute certainty and he was not plagued with doubt. Yes, doubt can be beneficial if it is answered by the Quran, if it is answered by the Ahlul Bayt, if it is answered by the scholars of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Yet if doubt lingers, if doubt remains, it festers and it creates an environment of uncertainty, the lack of yaqeen, the lack of certainty. And it leads a person to feel discontent in life. And the Quran says a solution to your problem. And that solution is Ala bizikrillahi tatma'inna al-qulub. That verily in the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find solace. Verily in the remembrance of God, the dhikrullah, will you find your tranquility and your peace. I say this in a time and an environment where study after study, research study after study, from psychologists, from economists, from experts in the field of human development of the mind, have said that as our world is increasing and progressing economically and in terms of material prosperity, our hospitals are getting better. For example, our institutions are getting stronger and better. In this environment, where, for example, healthcare, wealth, income, everything's increasing, human happiness is declining and decreasing. How can it be? I thought that happiness is in wealth. I thought that happiness is in economic development. I thought that happiness lies in having more money. Yet the science is showing that that is not the case. Is that to say that we should not strive to develop ourselves? Is that to say that we should not strive to increase prosperity? No, not at all. But rather, economic prosperity, money, income, wealth, in and of itself is not your solution. You need that, but you need before that a foundational element. Something that's even more important than that. Something which the Imams understood. Something which the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam understood. Something which Allah was inspiring us to understand through His messengers, through His representatives. And that is the foundational layer. You know, my dear brothers and sisters, that science and the data has become so strong, the correlation between unhappiness and economic development, that researchers are now saying that it is possible that when you see unhappiness increasing in a society, and all you know is that unhappiness is increasing, it's fair to assume that it's possible that economic development is occurring. Meaning what? Meaning that if you see people getting more unhappy in your society, it's possible that there's economic development going on. That's how strong some researchers have said this relationship is, this correlation is. But look at Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, that he's saying in Dua Arafah on the plains of Arafah, before going to Karbala, he's saying and giving the solution to tranquility and peace in your heart and mind for us all. He's saying, my Lord, my Lord, my Allah, my Rabb, my Creator, my Lord. What has he gained who has lost you? And what has he lost who has gained you? The absolute formula for your priority in life, for your certainty in life, and your greatness in life. Sometimes people think that when I live a God-centric life, when I live a life that is focused on the Creator and the Almighty, therefore by default I have to lose this world. No, not necessarily at all. You may have to take trials, you may have to sacrifice, but this world is meant to be a springboard for you to obtain the akhirah. That is, you and I are to struggle here to make our lives better, but also the lives of our families, our loved ones, our world better. And that's the manhaj, the message of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. How to balance the two. A life of balance. A life where you are working and striving for the hereafter, but you are not neglecting this world and living monk-like. That you are living a world in which you are contributing, in which you are benefiting society and the world around us. This is what Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt teach us. Their stand, their movement was based on the time in which they exist. It was based on the space in which they exist. I tell you this because philosophers and scientists have said that your thoughts, your worldview, your narrative is not necessarily based on your own thoughts. What are they based on then? They are based on your time and your space. They are based on the environment and the time in which you exist. The views and the thoughts of somebody who lives in, for example, 1600s China is very different than the thoughts of someone who lives in Dearborn in 2020. That worldview shifts drastically. The stand of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt was also based on the time and space in which they existed. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam's stand was necessary for that time and space. What Muawiyah had done and what culminated with the wretchedness of what Yazid had done, it required a stance from an infallible, immaculate Imam. But at the same time, had Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam been right there, he would have done the same. Had Imam Al-Sadiq been where Imam Hussein was, he would have done the same. And had Imam Hussein been where Imam Sadiq was, he would have done what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam did. Therefore, you and I understand that we must not only understand the manhaj of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, although that is of the utmost importance, we must understand that that mission and that stand is not separated from the stands of the other Ahlul Bayt and the other immaculate ones. With this we turn our hearts and our minds before Karbala, and welcoming the nights of Muharram, we turn our hearts and our minds towards Medina in the time of Rasulullah. We are told that Ayman has been crying the whole night. And the neighbors, they come and they send a message to Rasulullah. They say, Ya Rasulullah, Ayman has been crying the entire night. She has been weeping. And at that point in time, Rasulullah summons her and says, Ayman, what is the matter? Why have you been crying the whole night away? She said, I saw a very disturbing dream. Rasulullah knows, but he's asking for you and I to relay the message. What is it? Why is it that you cry in this way? What did you see in your dream? Tell me. She began to say, Ya Rasulullah, it was a very devastating dream. I saw that a piece of your limb had been cut and it had been thrown into my vicinity, into my home. Rasulullah, he said, this is a good dream. It's a blessing from God. He said, what? He said that I will have a son, a grandson, through my daughter, and you will bring this grandson to me. A few days passed, we are told, and the birth of the blessed son or the blessed grandson occurred in the house of Ali and Fatima. At that point in time, Ayman brought this child and said, Rasulullah enters onto the house and he says, bring unto me my child. And when he says, bring unto me my child, we are told at that moment in time, he is told that this child has not been washed. He has not been given the ceremonial ablution. He has not been given the washing. He says that this child, you will wash him. He has been washed by the Almighty. He has been cleansed by the Almighty. At that point in time, he began to see his beautiful child, his grandson, who he called his own son. And he began to hug him. Hussein, the name we are told can roughly be translated as little beauty. This Hussein who he names himself, he begins to see him and he begins to hold him in his hands. And he begins to weep as he smiles. He smiles and then he weeps. Fatima al-Zahra, the mother who has given birth to this child, begins to see this. Imagine you're a mother and imagine that you've just given birth. It is very normal for a grandparent to smile when they see a grandchild. But why these tears? At that point in time, Fatima al-Zahra, she says, my father, why is it that you weep? I see that you smile, but why do you weep? At that time we are told that Rasul al-Azam, the Holy Prophet, says, Fatima, have a seat. Amir al-Mu'mineen is there in the vicinity as well. Have a seat. And they sit down. And he says that I smile because of this jubilant young boy, but I cry because of what Jibreel has told me and what Jibreel has descended and he has conveyed unto me. At that point in time, we are told that Rasulullah, he begins to say that my grandson Hussein, he will do a great service to Islam. He will protect this deen. He will protect this religion. But it will come at a great price. It will come at the price of a sacrifice which this world has not seen before. It will require a massacre to occur, and it is one that only the most select of Allah's creation is willing to accept. None other than Hussein, your son Hussein. He will give everything on the plains of Karbala. But Fatima, tell me, was there something in this expectancy of Hussein, in this pregnancy, was there something unique? Tell me. Fatima says, my father, yes, this child in the womb would call on to me and would speak out to me. What would he say? Rasulullah knows this message must be conveyed to the people. What would he say, Ya Fatima? That this Hussein in the womb would say, my mother, and al-gharib, my mother, I am a stranger. Fatima, would he say anything else? At that point, Fatima would say, yes, he would say, my mother, ana al-atshan, my mother, I am thirsty. That imagine for a mother to hear these lines and these words from a child who's in the womb. But this is not an average child. This is not a normal child that you would expect. At that moment, Imam Al-Hussein is telling the world who he is. And then Fatima al-Zahra, she felt this affinity to this child, and Rasulullah, his eyes are filled with tears. He says, Fatima, your son Hussein, my grandson Hussein, he will be slaughtered on the plains of Karbala. 3 days, no food, no water. He will die in a strange land and he will be martyred. But the question on the heart of Fatima and on every mother's heart, Ya Rasulallah, will you be there? Fatima, I will not be there. Ya Rasulallah, will Ali be there? Ali will not be there. Ya my father, will I be there? Will Fatima be there? Fatima, you will not be there. Then who will cry for my son Hussein? Rasulullah says that Allah will give rise to a nation, Allah will give rise to a community whose elders will cry for Hussein's elders, whose youngsters will cry for Hussein's youngsters, whose men will cry for Hussein's men, whose women will cry for Hussein's women, and then this memory will be remembered until the very end of time. Fatima, this is the promise of Allah.
The shroud of a familiar man on you beckons, and the new moon's crescent with my blood it darkens. I see a flame in the heart, it awakens. At the sound of wailing children, this heart weakens. As approaches the horizon of my 10 days, the pangs of grief on hearing my name on you praise. Between your eye and your eyelid my body lays, and hear the angel of death on my body praise. If by my tragedy your heart it would falter, oh Shia, remember me when you support her. Why, O Abu Abdullah? For I was murdered, thirsty, alone, a stranger, أيوا حسينا ومظلوما وعطشانا. For I was murdered, thirsty, alone, a stranger. Indeed, my children would refuse water later. For what reason, O my lover, do your eyes weep? Is it that swords call my name whilst my soldiers sleep? Or that my flag bearer with no hands lies asleep, Aywa Abbasa, whilst fire and men upon my woman's tansip? Ajarakum Allah. The crescent of Muharram has approached us. The night of Muharram has approached us. These days in which the narrations would tell us that the Imams would not be seen smiling or in a happy state. They would be seen in states of grief. Ajarakumullah. In other narrations we find that in fact throughout the whole year they remember Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. They remember the tragedy of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. They remember the tragedy of the women who were taken as captives. Ajarakumullah. In narrations we have that Imam Zainul Abidin, for the years after Ashura, every time that food would be brought to him, he would mix it with the tears that flow from his eyes. Ajarakumullah. Our Imams would hold majalis throughout the whole year. Not only would they hold these majalis, but these majalis have a great blessing. Yes, they have the blessing of the attendance of Fatima al-Zahra, who looks for these majalis, who attends these majalis, inshallah, crying for her son who was slaughtered. In one narration, In one narration, one of the companions of Imam Al-Sadiq, he would ask him, I haven't seen you for a while. He said to him, do you remember that majlis that you had at your home? He said to him, yes, O master. He said to him, when you entered your house, there was a aba that you tripped over. He said, do you remember that scene? He said to him, yes, O my master. Which aba was that? Whose aba was that? He said, that was my aba. He said to him, O my master, why is it that you were standing by the door? Why did you not go inside the house to attend the majlis? He said to him, because my grandmother Fatima was sitting inside that majlis, weeping for her son Hussein. Ajarakumullah, the poet would describe as if Fatima Zahra asks her Shia. She says to them, where is the Shia that would help me weep and wail for my son? Where are the Shia that can help me wail for the son who was slaughtered on the plains of Karbala? For the infant that was slaughtered on the plains of Karbala? Where is the one that can help me cry for Al-Abbas? In what state? In the state where his hands were cut off. In the state where an arrow would hit his eye. وين اليواسين يا شيعة على حسين ولاده ورضيعه وابن والده عين الطليعه والله عباس شفنا يا قطيعه. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين.
وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى، صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين.
طولي الليل خلص الحيل عيوني ذبلها السهر، عيوني ذبلها السهر. أني كل ليلة انتظر وجهك اشتاق، تدري ما أحمي البعد يذبحني فراق. أنت رسمك